Someone in the comment field asked me to elaborate on the core issues, even though I made several videos about this, including what I had to go through to heal my core issues. I thought it was a good idea to talk about it a little bit more in the context of the hero's journey. Because the hero's journey is basically an archetype or like a blueprint, not only for storytelling, but also for the actual spiritual journey. And it always, in the movies, if you don't know what the hero's journey is, first of all, you should check out, I have 2 videos explaining a lot about that. You should watch these 2 before you listen to this. Anyway, so the hero's journey is a story blueprint that almost pretty much every timeless story ever told is based upon this blueprint, every myth. And the Hollywood uses this blueprint consciously after it was discovered in the, in the 50s, I think, by this guy who he basically analyzed all the myths in the world from across different times and places, and he came to the conclusion that they're all the same story, but with different superficial action, but still underneath it all, it's the same story being told. And the hero's journey is a reflection of the spiritual journey. And in all movies and all these stories based on the blueprint of the hero's journey, there is always a villain or an arch enemy, which is the polar opposite of the hero. And this villain is a reflection of our own inner Lucifer, or the core issues, which becomes the core of the inner negative ego, which everybody has, because it's impossible to avoid. It's impossible to not have core issues, because otherwise you would just be wide open. When you're born as a baby is wide open, is basically enlightened but with no experience. But something closes up after a while, and this becomes the core of the ego, because the pure spirit, that's the baby, meets the polluted mass consciousness, the negativity and the fear and everything from parents and from the mass consciousness, which is enough to create like a contraction or the original separation that creates the innermost core of the personality structure. And this innermost core is made of pure rage, basically, because it's in opposition to, it feels like it's been abandoned by God and the soul and everything, so it has to fend alone in a hostile world and take all the slings and arrows and pain that comes with that. So the inner ego, the inner core of the ego is like, it's in opposition to God. It's the inner antichrist that everybody carries underneath it all, and it's also blocking the true self, which is sort of beneath that again. So everybody has a true self that is pure love and light and consciousness, and then the core issues are surrounding that inner light. And then on top of the core issues, you have a whole personality structure, layers upon layers, developed as you grow up. But the core issues are a reflection of the arch villain in movies and in stories. And that's why many people, at least I guess everybody almost, you're secretly kind of rooting for the bad guy when you watch a movie. You kind of like the fact that, he wants the whole world to burn, and that's the core issues in you that's reflecting. That's why you sort of secretly, or maybe not so secretly even, but I always had that, I always kind of half secretly rooted for the bad guy a little bit, even though I mostly rooted for the hero. I still rooted for the bad guy also. I like the bad guy, It's like you like the bad guy because he's a reflection of something in you, and that is the negative core ego, or inner Lucifer as I call it, which resonates on the same frequency, you could say. And this inner Lucifer is when those core issues came up in me more and more, which took years before they came more and more to the surface. I actually had a conscious fantasies about seeing the whole world go up in flames, and how much I would enjoy that to happen, a nuclear holocaust or something. And that's how the inner Lucifer thinks. That's how the arc villain in movies also think. The arc villain in a movie always wants revenge. He's always self-made. He's artificial. The hero gets abilities that are divine when as he moves along his path to become more and more of his true self. The hero always starts out in a bad situation where he is very low. He's an ordinary guy, usually, and then he's trusted into the adventure that takes him on a journey that makes him grow in consciousness and awareness, and he gets abilities. The Matrix movie is a perfect example of the hero's journey. But the arc villain is always artificial. He has made some kind of artificial maybe machine or whatever that gives him special abilities and power in the world, and that's because the personality structure and the negative ego is also an artificial construction. It's not the natural self. It's a false self that's been created, and so the whole the hero's journey is an inner journey as well as an outer journey. In the movie you see mostly the outer journey, but you also see that the hero changes, which is the inner journey. And in the end, the hero always has to face off against the arch villain in the innermost castle, or whatever it is, and that's a symbolic of facing off against your own core issues, your own inner Lucifer, which is the dark night of the soul kind of situation, in which you can die and be reborn as a completely new version with your actual natural self as enlightenment when that happens. And the hero's journey always come with a death rebirth moment towards the end of the movie, in which the hero looks like he's drowning or something, and then he reappears, and then suddenly he knows what to do, how to beat the bad guy or the villain, and then everything accelerates towards the final climax. So it's all reflected in the hero's journey, the whole spiritual journey. And it's impossible. You cannot avoid. Nobody. If you could avoid having, in a perfect world, you could probably, or most, in different alien civilizations, people don't have this kind of inner Lucifer situation, because they have a completely different mass consciousness, and there's not so much, if any, negativity. So then you can just be a wide open, fully beingness, enlightened basically from birth until the end of the life. But this is not really possible on this planet, or it hasn't been. It will not be possible until the whole mass consciousness is upgraded to a completely new level, which is what this whole situation is about. So no matter what, even if you had perfect parents, that didn't do anything bad, the mass consciousness is still enough, or negativity in the mass consciousness is still enough to create the core issues, even though the core issues will not be very severe if you don't have anything particular that happened to you. But even how we treat babies in hospitals, it could probably be enough to create, negative core issues, because newborn babies are ripped from their mother and placed in plastic boxes under artificial lights, isolated like that, And many times the doctor will slap the newborn baby too to get the system working. And all this, this is the first meeting. The baby comes from very harmonious, symbiotic, environment in the womb, and this is the first brutal meeting with the 3D reality. That pure being, spirit, gets to experience. So, I think that's enough to create core issues too, at least to a certain degree. But my core issues were more severe because I didn't have a mother. My mother couldn't connect in a loving way with the newborn baby, which was me. And that creates a pretty nasty situation, a nasty vacuum inside, which it's the root cause of all sorts of addiction. In my case, it was alcohol a lot. I drank a lot because of this. I basically tried to fill this vacuum my whole life with alcohol. I was told when I healed the core issue. I talk about this in another video, but the point is, even with perfect parents and who gives birth at home or everything, and there's no hospital bullshit, the mass consciousness negativity is still enough, because I never heard about a person in this world that were born and never, did not have to be reborn to be enlightened, to put it that way. There's no stories of people being born and just being enlightened from childhood and throughout and then becoming a teacher like that. The teacher is always reborn. It's like enlightenment, it's kind of like, you feel like, it's like dying on the inside. You feel like you're dying, but you actually, it's the old artificial self that's dying, and the new real, the real beingness, that's the real you, is being born at the same time. So there's nothing you can do to escape having this separation. The core issues is also what causes the sense of separation, of being a separate entity, a person in space, instead of just being space itself, in which there is a person. I've had experiences where actually I became that space, and it's like a completely different world. You see everything differently. You experience life and yourself in a totally different way. So it's a big shift. But so everybody, even well-meaning parents like mine were and are, they didn't mean to do any harm to me. Like, their low level of consciousness created these situations in which they acted. Like, my father never hit me again. It was only one time that created these core issues when I was like 3 years old. I don't know what I did, but I did something probably. And he picked me up and he slapped me on the behind. And that shock, because it happened so quickly, and you're like a little, innocent little boy basically, and that created a big shock, trauma, energy that curled up in my gut. And that energy created all sorts of digestive and eczema problems that I had to heal for decades. I mean, my whole life was defined by 2 things that happened before I can even remember most of it, or any of it. So, and these are not, even well-meaning parents can do these things, because I think that, a boy, that's how you raise a boy. He needs to understand discipline or whatever. But for me, these 2 things were really, and especially the mother issue, obviously, that's the deepest, absolutely deepest. You're basically a newborn, and it's a world of pain because there is no love. I mean, they have actually, I read now that, and in addition to this, I was also put in an incubator because I was born too early. So that's when they put you in a plastic box and they poke at you with, plastic gloves and tubes and whatnot, which is not really the best way. They have now come to that conclusion, actually, scientifically. They had a study I read about in which some babies were placed in incubator when they were born too early, and some were left with their mother's breast, basically, with no artificial nonsense. And they had to stop the study early because it became so glaringly obvious that the children who was left with their mothers survived in a much higher rate than those put in a plastic, coffin. So the geniuses have now realized that, maybe it's a good idea to let the baby be with the mother. Oh my God, science is really smart these days. We have to actually couldn't figure that out just by intuition and natural understanding. We had to actually do research to figure out that a baby should be with his or her mother. That's a big symbol of how the whole world works. Everything is based on artificial. When the whole personality structure is based on an artificially created false personality with pure rage and separation at the core, then you get a reality where nothing is natural. That you have to do research to understand that a baby probably needs to be with his or her mother's breast instead of in a plastic stinking coffin full of tubes. But anyway, that's how it works in this reality, but we are about to change that. The mass consciousness is being cleansed, and people are also contributing, because obviously the inner Lucifer, the inner Antichrist that's at the core of everybody's personality structure, is what creates the mass consciousness organizing principle for negativity, or the collective Lucifer, as I call it. And you even have like a group of people on this planet who worship this collective Lucifer, and that's their god, and they do everything they can to create as much negativity as possible to feed this god, so that this god can have a food source, because it feeds on negativity, like I talk about in different videos. So the question becomes, how can you heal these core issues? If you don't have any severe core issues because most teachers, I've read about many different enlightened teachers in history, and very few, if any of them, speak about these core issues. They talk about, there is mentions about dark night of the soul, but this is the mysterious thing that nobody really defines what it is. They just, you can have a dark night of the soul and it can happen. But nobody, I don't think many teachers have actually gone through what I have when it comes to actually healing these core issues. Because you can't really find much about it as concretely as I'm describing it in my videos. Because I think most enlightened teachers, they come from higher levels. They just volunteer to go here on a mission to help people, and they don't really have to go through all that much in terms of healing, and at least in many cases they just live a normal life or some kind of life, and they just at some point they just get enlightened. Maybe they did some spiritual stuff, but they would have gotten enlightened anyway, because it was meant to be, and that was part of the the deal. So basically, I started out at very low level. I spent years in level 50 on the scale, like at bottom of the scale, before I had to go through all sorts of stuff to get up. So I lived through the scale more than most teachers. And I also spent years facing the core issues coming up more and more, and then finally needing or getting ET/higher mind assistance to actually heal these core issues. So I don't really know, that's the problem. I don't really know how you can heal. If you have severe core issues like I had, I don't know how you can heal them without that kind of assistance, because it's that kind of assistance I got, because it's I don't know, if that stuff happened to me with no context, nobody to explain to me what was going on, and nobody to sort of facilitate it, and I don't know how how would you react if suddenly a pain snake comes out of your chest and it seems to go on and on and on. You have no idea what it is about. I would most likely just shut it down so it didn't come out anymore and just go back in, right? In fact, I almost did that. He told me, no, don't let it go back in. You have to face this, he said to me when it happened, because I almost shut down even with his assistance. So that's how bad it was. So I really don't know. But if you only have the default core issues, that your father never hit you, your parents were good, your mother loved you as a baby, then if you reach the higher levels, your dark night of the soul is not going to be that bad. And you might just at some point get enlightened if you reach the 500s and higher 500s. You might at some point just make a jump into enlightenment and land somewhere higher on the higher levels. But I don't think you can be enlightened and still carry, if I became enlightened while still carrying these core issues, I don't think that would be a very good situation, because I would still have that inside. I don't know if that's even possible. I don't think so. But it would explain that certain enlightened teachers fell from grace and did nasty stuff to their followers, because there are cases of that in history too. So it could be that that's the case, that these people got enlightened but still had core issues that wasn't dealt with, and that created, when they got all the power that comes with being a guru and having a following, these inner Lucifer used the situation in a subtle way to do nasty stuff. That could explain it. I don't know, but I'm just happy I got rid of those core issues, because they've been troubling me the whole life without me even knowing that I had them. So, but it depends. But you can always ask for assistance. Your higher mind is always with you, even though it doesn't usually talk to you, like it did to me. But it can, and it can also assist you without talking. There are many ways. It depends on your individual situation. But there is no escaping the original sin, or not sin in that sense, but the original separation from beingness. You cannot escape that in this world, and the spiritual journey will take you to a point where you actually have to face this inner Lucifer being, or artificial construct of your personality. So you're basically deconstructing your whole personality all the way back to the innermost core. And not many teachers talk about this. I think it's really important to actually know about, because it can take you completely by surprise. You think that the worst is finished because you have come so far and been through so much, and reached a high level of 500s. That's like very blissful levels. I had bliss for several years, like immense, intense bliss and kundalini energies and like all these good things, and then suddenly I was taken completely by surprise, because things were getting worse and worse, and I couldn't understand why. I thought I was completely cleansed. I was just basically waiting to make the jump into enlightenment. That's what I thought. But instead I was dragged through the mud one more time for 1 decade more, with years of disease, and then after that more and more anger and negativity in my chest area that these core issues caused, and self-destructive behavior and all sorts of stuff. So I really wish that there were more teachers would talk about this, and because it's better that if you know about it, it's better, because I had no idea. I didn't know what was wrong, because I was already at such a high level. I thought, well, how can I feel so bad at this level? I knew I was high level because of the experiences and what happened before, and also because I can calibrate, and even teachers told me I was at that level, so I had no doubt about that. But I just couldn't understand. Nobody was telling me. Like, I had no idea what is all this negativity and anger and feeling horrible, feeling worse and worse every day. It was a constant suffering. It never went away. It just became more and more. Even as I had sessions with enlightened teacher, I feel blissed out in the session, but when I leave the next day or whatever, just the core issues are so enraged that they even got worse. It's like they're taking revenge. And so then, I stopped having sessions because I didn't want to feel so bad for weeks after it lasted, before it calmed down a little bit. But I don't know, it's going to be rough to see. I mean, if millions of people are going to have to go through the similar things that I did, it's going to be interesting to see what pops up on YouTube, and if people talk about this in forums and all over the place on internet, because I would really like to hear other people's experience of actually healing these things. But so far I haven't seen or heard anybody else. So, but the problem is that it's so scary. It can be so full of, the whole experience is so full of fear. You have to be ready to face and hold a lot of fear without being too afraid to freak out completely. That's the whole point, and that can be so scary that certain people will be scared away from the whole path. Basically, they will not want to pursue anything like that anymore. So I guess that's the big problem for the ETs who are assisting all this is like, who is ready for such an experience that will not freak them out completely. But Bashar has said 2023 is the target year for to start the window of first contact to open, and that window will last for a decade. But as far as I understand, I think they want a lot of people to go through similar things that I did to heal these core issues before or within that year. Because they need it at some point very soon. They're going to need to trigger some kind of event, because if they don't, the world is going into more and more negativity because of all the big fear agendas they have going now, with the climate change nonsense and the virus stuff. So they have a big global fear campaigns going on that really wreaks havoc on the mass consciousness. So it's being balanced out, of course, because people of high level balance out thousands and thousands of people of low level. So there's enough people to keep the mass consciousness pretty high level, even though you have all this fear going on a mass scale. And that's the good news. The mass consciousness is actually in the high 400s, and it will be in the 540s when after the event it will be in the level of unconditional love, and then that's a massive change. If you can get the mass consciousness at that plateau level, it's a big deal, and that's like the first plateau, and then we will take several decades more to get the mass consciousness into enlightened levels, which means a lot of people will have to will become enlightened. So basically I was told we will shift incrementally into, just as you holding the fort basically and keep your level high, you will shift incrementally into different reality versions or different earth versions, which will reflect your level more and more. And this will happen in stages, like in jumps, not because it's all splitting apart these days. So the best you can do is try to keep the spirit high and be ready to face a lot of fear. Train yourself to be comfortable, at least enough to not freak out if you have to face some fear. And that's and then you can ask for assistance or pray for guidance and assistance in healing whatever core issues you might have. And it's a really dire situation right now. Everything is in up in the air. There's no certainty and except the fact that we will somehow get through this, and we will ascend, and we will we will create a golden age Earth. But how it plays out is is probably a reason the whole universe is here observing this planet right now, because it's quite a show. And nothing like this has been done before, apparently. So we're all part of a big situation, a big deal, and it's not been easy. But it feels like it takes too long. You know, just days pass by and there's nothing but this negative stuff all the time. The virus, this and that, and you know, so many people got this and vaccine and all that stuff. But we will just have to soldier through, as they say, and hopefully it will be worth it. I believe, I'm pretty certain, or I'm actually 100% certain it will be worth it when we get through this and everything changes and your whole reality changes and you get back to your true self. It will be definitely feel like it was worth it.